for two. Kickers are extra, I give them the boot. Ooh, going for two. Sit back, relax while I grab me a brew. Ooh, now I'm reclining while putting my time and I'm ready to go. My spine is aligning and much my lineups, my bank account grow. I am so rich, but knowledge is all that I'm leaving it with. Ooh, listen to this. Multiple options, how far can I get? Ooh, DFS Dynasty redraft tonight, I'm not finishing last. I'm finishing past any and all, I am looking to last. What else? This spot is popping and I am so locked in and only opening the door when it is opportunity knocking. And all of these spots keep on talking and talking. So what are we talking? What kind of alignment and running it deep? Even players forgotten or came from the bottom or hitting that top end. And this spot is popping, yeah, this spot is popping. And woo! This is the armchair, yeah. Put up your arms, yeah. Sound the alarm, yeah, yeah, yeah. Woo!
What is going on, guys, and welcome to episode 361 of the Armchair Fantasy Show. I'm your host, of course, Geoff Lambert. You can follow me on Twitter at GeoffLambert77. Of course, we're part of the Going for Two Live podcast network, and we're here every Friday night on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. Also, our own website now. We've got our own audio-video website, Going4Two.live. And, of course, we're syndicated in all major podcast networks. If you're on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button. Also comment in the chat. We'll try to get to any of your questions as we go throughout the show. Here is my co-host, as usual, Mr. Tim Strobel. What's up, Tim?
Oh, Geoff, I'm so happy to be back. Got to spend some good time with my family over Thanksgiving, make some money on that Thanksgiving slate, and ready to roll it over into Week 13.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Joining us tonight, he's been on the show a couple times last year. Aaron, he's formerly of Going4Two.com, and he's one of the guys I go to a lot when we talk cash game builds. We talk throughout the week. Aaron, what's up, man?
What's up, man? Appreciate y'all having me. I know trying to get it done. Schedule's a little crazy. Finally got one lined up, though.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Glad to get you on the show, but before the end of the season. And speaking of which, man, it is freaking Week 13. Can y'all believe that?
No, crazy.
It's insane how fast the season is gone. I can't believe it's Week 13 already. Insane.
Sitting and watching a college bowl game, thinking, man, it's already almost over.
Yep, it's insane. It goes way too fast. All right, as always, guys, today's show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check out their best ball leagues, huge tournaments, private leagues, and pick'ems for every major sport. Use our promo code GF2 to get a deposit match up to $100. It's as simple as that. Go download the app. It's Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code GF2. Start drafting best ball leagues. Do some pickups for every major sport. Again, that promo code is GF2. Let's get to the rewind.
The weekly rewind. Rewind.
Before we get to our one good, one bad, I do want to shout out the winner of the DFS for Toys contest, Commissioner Breeze on Twitter. At MCBreeze11 on Twitter is his Twitter handle. Took it down by fading Christian McCaffrey, which is pretty ballsy. And he was able to beat us. I think I came in fourth. I was creeping up there towards the end, but I couldn't quite pull it out. So he will get the championship belt. But the real winners, guys, we raised $1,900 for the kids. Pretty awesome. My wife and I went shopping yesterday. Literally filled the car to the top. Like, we literally had stuff in our laps. We had so much toys to try to bring home in our car. And we're going this week to drop them off at the fire station. So we'll get pictures and post those on Twitter. But thank you to everybody that played in the tournament, that donated. Really appreciate it. Absolutely crushed our goal, almost doubled it. So great job there. All right, let's get to our one good, one bad. Tim, why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah, my one good was Josh Allen. I said last week it was Josh Allen week. And if I could, I'd run 150 Josh Allen lineups. And Josh Allen ended up being in the optimal, man. I think he had 43 DraftKings points last week. So an absolute smash. The one bad for me was Jaylen Warren. Report came out Sunday morning that he was going to get the bulk of the snaps at running back. Obviously in a good matchup, I thought, against Cincinnati. So I was looking all week for a way to get Diggs in my lineup. So I moved down to Warren to fit Diggs. That did not work out for me at all.
Yeah, Warren killed me in some of my tournament lamps as well. What about you, Aaron? What did you have for your one good, one bad last week?
One good was the one I stuck with Muth. I even stuck with it and played him in cash, which everybody, thought it was a little crazy, but I was feeling it, and obviously it worked out. It made everything else work, and he like 24 fantasy points, something like that, at 2,900.
Yep.
So, I mean, it opened a lot of stuff up. The one bad was I took Kyron out of my cash lineup, and it didn't even matter who I put in over there. It was all bad just because I took him out.
Yeah.
I had the Warren mistake too.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Kyron just went bananas. I didn't see that one coming. He was a good play. I had him in some of my lineups. Actually had him in my best tournament lineup, but nobody saw that coming. His first game back, he just balled out like that. Absolutely crazy. So my one good was I said it on the show that I was taking Nico Collins over Tank Dell. Tank Dell was good too. If you played Tank Dell, you weren't disappointed. But Nico Collins had lower ownership and was cheaper. Ended up scoring more points than Tank Dell. So the fact that I stuck to my guns and went Nico over Dell paid off in my tournament lineups. And then the top matchup, I mentioned it on the show last week, according to FTN, on the main slate at least, was DeAndre Hopkins. And he did not pan out at all. Granted, it wasn't the perfect matchup score that we usually look for with the 100%. It was, I think, 86%. So I played in a couple places just to see if the matchup thing would work with the 86, and didn't quite work out for me on the D-Hop call. Didn't kill me too bad, though. I wasn't too exposed to him, but he was a bad call overall. All right, let's go ahead and get into this week's slate.
Let's talk quarterbacks.
All right, we'll kick it off right here at the top with the elite quarterbacks, and we'll kick it off with you first, Aaron. Give me one of your elite quarterbacks here.
Which I think we all pretty much got the same ones, but
We do.
Tua, I'll go with Tua, 7,900, but against that Washington defense, if they couldn't cover the field with a blanket, and they got Tyreek and Waddle, so I'd say Tua. He has this trend. I don't know if you've looked at his game logs, but he got a trend where he'll go one game like 20 plus, and then he'll go 10, 12 finish points, and the next game he'll go back over 20 plus. And if you look at the last one, he was around 12 or something like that. So if the trend continues, he's going back over 20 for sure.
Yeah, I got something on that one later.
Good stuff. We do have a season-long question here I want to get to from AKA Bash. He's got season-long. He wants to know, you got to pick 2 running backs and 3 receivers. His running backs are Eckler, A.J., Kyron, Rashad White, and James Conner. 2 of those are going to be tough to pick. And then his receivers are Amon-Ra, Waddle, Pittman, Tank, and Debo. First of all, that's a solid lineup overall.
That is a very nice lineup.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong.
I think it's probably Kyron and White for me.
Yeah.
Achan, I'm not sure if he's going to be a full go. And then definitely the Sun God. What do you think? Pittman. And then I think Waddle or Tank is probably a coin flip.
Yeah, I think
if you want the upside, it's probably Waddle.
Yeah.
It's pretty close.
I'm going to go Kyron Eckler. I think I'm going to go. I like all
Kyron
three of those guys. Yeah.
It is. I was going to say it's hard to, you draft Eckler as high as you do at this time. This time
not
of year,
to play him. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, so I don't think you go wrong with Eckler, Kyron and White, but Kyron's definitely the first one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I think, Sun God, Pittman, and then to me, I'd say, with the Tank stuff, I think it's between Waddle or Debo, and I think that offense, I kind of lean Waddle.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully we answered your question. Tim, give us one of your other elite quarterback. We only had 2. We each had the same.
Yeah, we do. We both have the same 2. So he had 2. I will take CJ Stroud. It's just another week, it's going to be the first time, I think, all year. We'll talk about this later, that I don't have Tank Dell as like a lock in my lineup. But I'm going right back to CJ. He's made me a lot of money this year. It's a great matchup against Denver. We saw obviously everybody's blown up on Denver. Right, we have them at 28th DVOA, 25.5 implied total. He has a couple guys banged up. We'll talk about later, but it's just you just keep playing CJ, man. You keep making money. So I'm going to roll it out. He is over 8K now at 8,100. That is a little concerning because it makes him tough to stack because both of his guys are priced up now. But there's enough value on the slate. If you want to, you can get there.
Yeah, agreed.
I think that's really the theme of the slate, by the way, this week is value. Right. Usually around this time of year, right, you're like, oh, man, I'm having to squeeze in lineups that make me uncomfortable. And not this week, man. There's so much value.
100%.
Definitely some stars and scrubs, but then value's a lot better than normal.
100%. All right. So that's it for the elites here. So I'll kick off the mid tier here and I'll talk about my boy Brock Purdy, going to Philly at 6.1. Philly gives up the second most points to quarterbacks. They also give up the most points to receivers too. So you know, obviously stacking options are going to be there. I think the 49ers want to prove that, you know, in the playoffs last year when Purdy went down, that they can actually play with this Eagles team. So, and the Eagles defense is not what it was last year. We talked about it all season, but that pass defense has not been good. If you look at DVOA versus position, I think they're like 32nd versus the receiver 1, the 28th versus the slot receiver, 31st versus the receiver 2. Like, they're just bad at every position as far as that goes. So Purdy, I think, is going to be his normal efficient self. He's not going to, break the slate or anything, but he'll be efficient enough at 6.1. That's all you need him to do. So I think Purdy's to be probably one of the higher owned quarterbacks on the entire slate. And I like him a lot this week. What about you, Tim? What you got for your mid?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Sam Howell, man. I've been playing this guy all year long. We always talk about, and he still leads the league in pass attempts, right? He's throwing 40 plus times a game. He's got a matchup against Miami, but we've seen quite a few teams be able to throw on Miami, right? I think they're 20th DVP against quarterbacks. So, we expect them obviously to get behind in this game. I don't think they win this game by running the ball. It's going to be through the arm of Sam Howell. And we talked about this in the pre-show. Brock Purdy, at least on my projections, is looking like the highest owned quarterback on the slate. So I really like Sam Howell at a pivot at only $100 more. Because I think everybody's going to play Purdy.
Yeah, something I can do when I'm on FTN just messing around. I like to go and sort some of the columns just to see who fits at the top. And I sorted today by pass percentage, highest pass percentage for an offense. And number one team was the Commanders at 68%, a full 3% higher than the Cincinnati Bengals, which is insane to think that they pass the ball that much. But yeah, they're going to be a very high pass volume offense. And I think, especially with the matchup that they have, they're going to have to play to keep up. So they may have to throw the ball 75% of the time this time just to kind of keep pace with this team.
Sure. But I think it was every game, but like one or two, House had at least 39 plus attempts.
Yeah. I think I had written down that he has in the last 6 games, I believe, thrown at least 42 times in each of the last 6 games, which is an insane pace for a quarterback like Howell.
And one of those was over 50. Just insanity.
Absolutely. So that's it for the mid-tier guys. I'll let you kick off the value tier here, Aaron. Give me one of your value guys.
I know we talked about it. I go with Russ. I'm surprised, really, in at first he wasn't popping out to me because I was on that Howard Purdy train. But now, showing, depending on where you look, Russ was one of the top 2, definitely top 3 ownership. And, considered top 2 value at the position. And surprisingly, the Broncos, they've turned around the last few weeks. And that Russ and Sutton connection has been pretty solid. And as long as they feed Javonte, they seem to win right now. And Russ, I think, like last 4 or 5, he's still at least 18 a game at 5,700. On this slate, with everything else you kind of want. Hard to go against that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think he's starting to pick up some yards with his legs now too. I think he had 34 yards rushing in the last game. He had the Minnesota game. We only got 1, but before that he had Buffalo and Kansas City where he had 30 yards each. So he got a little bit of points there as well on the ground, which he wasn't getting there for a while. So yeah, I think at 5.7, he's definitely in play for sure.
Yeah, one thing I also had as well is that Cleveland allows the lowest completion percentage in the league. He was at 59% in that game, but prior to that, 77%, 83%, 63%, 69%. So I put on the spreadsheet, is Russ cooking? He's not throwing the ball 40 times like he used to, but I feel like his efficiency has gotten better, and that's what you're really looking for a quarterback.
100%.
I think he finally bought into what Peyton was trying to get him to do instead of trying to be Russ.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just kind of what Pete Carroll did when he was in Seattle too. Like, Pete Carroll kind of kept Russ in check a little bit. Like, okay, we're going to do this, and you're just going to follow the game plan. And as long as he does that,
you got to.
Yep, 100%. Tim, what you got for your value?
Yeah, I'm going to go. I call it the puke stack of the week. The puke stack for me this week is Kenny Pickett. We talked about it a little bit before, but with Matt Canada out, he was kind of cooking a little bit last week, right? Previous games, he had 106 yards, 126 yards, 160 yards passing. Last week, he came out the gate with 278, right? And he's got a great matchup against Arizona, who I think is 30th DVOA. So yeah, if I feel like if there was ever a Kenny Pickett, week, this might be it. Now, the one caveat I will put on that is that this is supposed to be a rain game. So I would definitely keep an eye on the weather there. If that ends up being the case, then I'm going to be all over the Warren and Najee Harris. But if the rain holds off, man, I could see it being a Kenny Pickett game.
I wrote Pickett on there too. I mean, being a Steelers fan, it's kind of, I was trying not to be biased with it, but he's due for a lot of positive touchdown regression, and he had the one drop. I mean, if they'd have challenged it, his stat line looks a lot better with the one that Deonte had last week. With Tomlin challenged it, it was touchdown.
Yeah.
All right, so I had one guy that we hadn't talked about yet, and I put him on there kind of as a joke, and then I went and looked at ownership and goes, man, this guy's actually got some decent ownership going. That's Baker Mayfield versus Carolina at 5.5. I put down, revenge ? Of course, because he played for Carolina last year, and it didn't work out so well. He's kind of made a trip around the NFL. He went to the West Coast for a while. Now he's back in Tampa, and at 5.5, Baker's he's a decent pivot off some of the guys we talked about. Probably not the same ceiling as maybe a Russ has, but I think he's still pretty solid. And like I said, he's going to be a little bit more motivated to play this Carolina team after they kind of gave up on him so quickly. So at 5.5, I like Baker a lot. Tim, there's one more guy on your list. I don't know if you wanted to talk about him in a positive light or a negative light.
I do. I want to talk about Joe Flacco. I think that's one of the big stories this week is that DTR will be out. Joe Flacco will be starting for the Browns. He's 38, right? He hasn't played in almost a year, but he's still Joe Flacco, right? So I've seen some people, projecting him really well and talking about playing him in cash. So I say no to Flacco in cash. I don't think that's an option. Now, if you do want to play Flacco in tournaments, he has basically the cheapest stack on the whole slate. So that can definitely be a way to fit in all of the really high-priced guys. But, I don't expect Flacco to come out the gate here and throw the ball 40 times, right? They're going to bring him in as a game manager, try and run the ball, throw it 20, 25 times. So he realistically could give you 11 points, and you have to know that going in.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. All right, let's get to the tight ends.
Did somebody say tight ends?
All right, we all have the same elite tight end there. And I'm just going to mention him so that we can get down into the next ones. George Kittle at 6.2, really the only elite tight end on the slate. And, the Eagles, as we mentioned, they're bad pass defense. They're bad against tight ends too, dead last in DVOA versus the tight end. Kittle, I looked at his splits. He's not as good on the road as he is at home. I think a lot of times when they're on the road, they want to run the ball and control the clock. So he ends up blocking a lot more than you really want him to be. But Kittle is one play away from a 60-yard touchdown, which we saw a couple weeks ago. So he can always pay off that 6.2 salary in a great matchup like this. I can see Kittle having a big game here. So I like Kittle a lot this week. But I think where you're probably going to be earning sort of your money in the tight end is going to be in the mid-tier and maybe even in the value.
Hey, before we move on, though, I do want to mention real quick, because none of us had him, was Sam Laporta. Last week, we talked about him on the Thanksgiving show, that he wasn't getting as much volume because of the two running backs, and then he got 8 targets last week.
Yep.
So New Orleans is one of the worst teams against tight end. I do think he's kind of sneaky. I don't think a lot of people will be playing Detroit stacks this week. So I actually kind of like Laporta as a sneaky high-end option.
I had him on there. I had him originally on the sheet and took him off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good call. All right, we'll move down into the mid-tier here. Aaron, give us one of your mid-tier guys.
I'll go back to my guy Muth, I guess, just because last week he came through big time for me. I know the Cardinals, they got 2 pretty good safeties, so it's not as great as it looks on paper, I don't think, but still the way that Pickett looked at him coming back, and even for last year, whenever Pickett was really like the games that he was doing good in, it involved Muth in every one. And I think, the talk about how he had 80 some pass attempts and only used the in between the hashes like 3 times up until this previous game. The new coordinators, like they want to establish that middle of the field just to keep the long stuff open for Pickens and them. I think Moose is another one. I'll go back to the well for him. I don't think I'll get to him in cash. I think that price might be kind of hard with cash, but he's still solid.
Definitely agree with that for sure. Like that price is still a good price too, especially for the amount of targets he got last week. If he gets that kind of volume again, for sure, I love that. Tim, you have the other guy that we all have. Talk about Njoku a little bit.
Yeah, I think it changes a little bit with the Flacco news, but I still think he's a great play. It's a good matchup against the Rams, right? They give up, I think, the 7th most points to tight end. But we always say, right, a new quarterback, who's he going to look for? His tight end, right? Those short passes over the middle of the field. So I think it's a good matchup. Flacco historically has thrown to his tight ends, right? Tight end scoring is one of the most correlated to a quarterback of any position. So it is possible that they come in and just feed Njoku. His volume lately has been incredible. 9 targets, 15 targets, 9 targets, 6 targets over the last 4 weeks. So
yeah,
I think he might be the safest tight end on the board, or at least he was until the big news that came out today, which I think changes things a little bit. We'll talk about that later.
With Njoku, 8 or more targets in 5 of the last 6, and 10 fantasy points in 6 straight or more. Like that's It's hard to go against that.
That's what you're looking for as a cash tight end, right? Like I think going into the week, he was kind of the clear cash tight end because of just that consistency and volume without a massive price increase, right? Everybody else who has that kind of volume is 5,000 or above.
Yeah.
Maybe Trey McBride's 4,900, so 4,900 and above.
Yeah. And the thing with Njoku too, because I've watched a couple of these games, is you might think, oh, quarterback change, he may not target Njoku as often. But they've actually run tight end screens quite often.
Yeah.
And that's going to be something that they're going to scheme up once again, that he can get those targets on those screen plays. And Njoku's an athlete, so he can.
He's a freak athlete, man. They definitely do scheme stuff for him, no matter who's taking snaps.
Yep. All right, let's move down into the to the value tier here. And why don't you kick off our value tier here, Aaron?
I go with my guy, Brevin. Like I said, we was talking about earlier last year when I've done the show. I made my sit call was Brevin last year, the only sit call that I got right, but no Dalton Schultz. And, with Schultz out in the way that CJ's throwing, and my belief is the Broncos DBs are pretty solid on the outside. So, it could force even more target to the middle to Brevin. He's an athlete just like Njoku. He's a mismatch for some of those inside linebackers that they try to line up on him.
Yeah, good call. Tim, what you got?
2,500, you don't need much.
Yeah, that price is incredible. I mean, he's stone minimum. I think before Brevin news came out, I was really on Logan Thomas. He's somebody I've been playing all year. I talked about how much I like Howell this week. Miami, let me get this. I think they're 10th worst against tight ends, so it's not the best. But the one thing we talked about, same thing with Njoku, is they find ways to get him targets every single game, right? And that's really what you're looking for in a cash tight end. He only had 4 targets last week, but that was Dallas. Previous to that, 8, 5, 6, and 8 targets. So he's very consistent. It's a pretty good matchup. And like we talked about with Howell, they're going to throw the ball 40 plus times in this game. So I'm figuring at least 6 to 8 of those targets got to go to my boy LT.
Yeah, that's a good call. I have a guy that Gerson coined Joanna Man, Mr. Juwan Johnson, at 3.4. We obviously know no Michael Thomas. Pretty sure we're not going to get Rashid Shaheed in this game. Potentially, I think it's still up in the air that there's going to be no Olave in this game.
Yeah, Shaheed was already ruled out.
He's already ruled out.
Olave is very questionable.
Very questionable. Yeah, I think
he'd be surprised if he plays.
Yeah, 100%. So you're running out of targets there, right? It's going to be Kamara and it's going to be Juwan Johnson really getting the targets. And, he kind of came on a little bit last week as well. And at 3.4, I think that price tag's still pretty good. And we've seen in the past where Derek Carr does target his tight ends in the red zone. So you're looking for that touchdown, which I think he had one last week. So Juwan Johnson is my other value tight end. And I'll mention, just so we can move on to running backs, we also had Cade Otton at 3,200 is also another guy that we're looking at this week. So, but let's go ahead and we got a ton of running backs and receivers to talk about. Let's go ahead and jump into that.
It's time for running backs. Running backs.
All right, Tim, kick us off here. What you got for your elite level running backs here?
Yeah, we're going to start at the top with your boy Christian McCaffrey, right? I feel like every slate you have Christian McCaffrey, you have to start there. And as we talked about at the top, there is enough value on the slate where you can certainly get to Christian McCaffrey if you wanted to. Now, it is arguably the worst matchup for running backs against Philly, but we know big reason you play Christian McCaffrey is how he gets used in the pass game. 6 targets, 5 targets, 10 targets, 7 targets. That's mid-range wide receiver 2 usage at the running back position. We know he's still going to get, 12 to 14 carries on the ground. So I like McCaffrey this week. I'm not as worried about the matchup. It might hold his ceiling down a little bit, but from a cash perspective, I don't know that there's any running back that you feel better about this week, other than the free square we'll get to later.
Yeah, agreed. Chris McCaffrey is always in play, no matter what his price tag is, or matchup for that matter. I think he's always in play. 9,000 is a pretty steep price to pay, but with the value that we have on the slate, you can easily get the Christian McCaffrey for sure. Aaron, what you got for your elite?
Obviously, there wasn't very many, but the other one is Kamara. It's not so much. With all the other running backs we got, I don't know that definitely wouldn't consider it for cash or anything like that. But some big GPP, yeah. Like we mentioned, all the guys that's going to be out, possibly, and if Olave's out, Kamara, he already is a target hog. That's even more to him. Detroit's tough against running backs, but you're going to figure Olave and Shaheed. That's probably at least 8-10 targets minimum. That's got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think
Captain check down Carr. He likes it. So
yeah, it's like Kamara had a game earlier this season. I think his first game back where he had 13 receptions. So that's insane volume right there. He can see something like that again this week. Tim, you got one more elite guy there.
Yeah, it was Kyron. Obviously the guy that broke the slate last week. It's very clear, right, how the Rams feel about him. When he's there, he is their main guy. Last week they were going to scale him back, or for his first game in, he had 16 rushes and then 6 targets. Obviously, 6 catches for 2 touchdowns. So that volume is as good as anybody on the slate. That's very comparable to the volume that Christian McCaffrey is getting at $1,800 less. It's also a better matchup than Christian McCaffrey is getting with a home game against looking at it here. Sorry. So I don't know. I think it's going to be tougher to get to this week because I think you're paying all the way up or all the way down. But, Cleveland, right, you want to run against them, right? It's their secondary that's really strong. They're a little more susceptible in the running game. So I think it's a GPP play, certainly. But I do think Kyron still has some upside at 7,200.
Yeah, and I can't remember if I mentioned it on the show last week or if it was on my Wednesday show that I mentioned it, but we were talking about snap share for running backs. And I named, your usual suspects like Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, and the number one running back in the snap share was actually Kyron Williams, even going back to, before he got hurt. He's getting more snaps than any running back, out there. So he's on the field that much at 7,200. You definitely need to have him in your lineups for sure. So that's a good call. All right, we'll move down into the mid tier, and we have our first
lock it in.
All right, Aaron, give us your lock of the week here.
Let's go Rashad White. Especially, when I say lock, I'm normally concentrate more cash games, and I'm more of a cash game player in single entry and 3 max. So White, 15 plus touches in every game, but like one. He can get their ground or the air and the matchup. You can't get a whole lot better than the matchup he's got, and I've played him I think a few weeks in a row now, and he's got one of the best matchups he's had. I don't see why I would get off the train now.
Yeah, I think the Panthers have given up a ton of touchdowns to running backs too. They gave up 2 last week to Derrick Henry, who we know hasn't done a whole lot this season, but Derrick Henry got loose against them. It's pretty much who the Panthers played a running back that's playing against them because they're probably gonna have a good game. And Rashad White was doing good even before that, so the matchup just makes it even better. So 6.3, I love the Rashad White as well. I'm all over him. Tim, what you got for your mid?
Yeah, I really like Ramondre Stevenson this week. He's not normally somebody that I play, but a couple things come into effect here. One, the quarterback change I feel like has kind of suited him a little bit. He's been getting more receptions lately than he was getting earlier in the season. Last week he had 5 targets. Previous to that, 5 targets, 6 targets, 4 targets. But he's still getting the same volume on the ground, 21 attempts, 20 attempts. He gets a real favorable matchup this week at home against the Chargers. And the cherry on top of everything is this projected as a rain game. I currently show 100% chance of rain in that game. So if this becomes a low scoring, slug it out, that's perfectly, in his wheelhouse. We obviously saw him break off with a long one. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? So he's still got that in him a little bit. Yeah, he is giving up some snaps to Zeke, but he's still dominating a lot of the red zone snaps, which is what you're looking for. And so at 6K, I think he's just underpriced compared to his volume that he's currently getting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think he's going to be top 3, top 4 on running back too. Like it'll be. I'll probably show up with Ramondre in the cash game lineup myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with, I know we talked about it a little bit pregame, and I think you both said you weren't on this guy, but I actually do like Javonte this week at Houston at 5.7. And it comes down to opportunities. I mean, he's getting all the opportunities in this offense. I think he's getting an average of 18 opportunities a game at 5.7. Houston is not, they're kind of middle of the pack, I believe, against the run. They're not great. Yeah. They're decent. But like I said, it's opportunities. It's the fact that it's his show. I think Jamil McLaughlin, who was a popular guy in the beginning of the season, is not getting on the field. Samaje Perine did have a touchdown, I think, last week, kind of vultured it from Javonte. So people kind of were excited about that. But Javonte still had, I think, 18 carries last week and a couple catches in the passing game as well. So at 5.7, I still like that volume quite a bit.
He also had 70% snaps last week, which was his highest percentage all year.
Yeah,
I was on Javonte too. That's what another, like I said, 20 plus targets in 3 of the last 4, and he's definitely due for some touchdown, some positive touchdown. I mean, he's lost some at the goal. Like normally, I'd say they're going to be coming his way. And Denver, they've been winning here lately, and when they've been winning, they've been feeding Javonte and Russ not turning it over and just keeping the other offense off the field as much as they can.
100%.
Yeah. He's had some really bad touchdown luck. He's had 30 red zone opportunities this year and just does not match up with his touchdown scoring.
I don't think there's anyone alive or that we've talked to here it's more on Javonte train than me and Geoff. We've been for 2 years waiting for it.
100% agree. I do have one more guy I'm going to mention, and then I'll go back through to y'all because y'all have some more guys to talk about, but I want to hit the drop first. King Henry, I talked about him last week. He had 2 touchdowns. And this is more of a GPP pivot off of the chalk that we're going to get to in a little bit here. Because it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Henry comes out and dominates this defense. And the Zach Moss, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Everybody knows by now, Zach Moss is going to be the chalk of all chalks. He's a free square. Everyone's going to be on him. So I can see a scenario where Henry comes out, dominates this game, and then the Colts are forced to pass the ball, and sort of limiting Moss a little bit. I don't fade them by any means, but I do think that there's a scenario in which Henry could be the guy that they really kind of lean on in this game to keep that Colts offense off the field. So he's my pivot at 6.8.
You forgot to mention the most important stat, Geoff. We're now officially in December.
That's right. It is.
The calendar has changed, man. He gets a home game in December. I feel like that's just almost a lock, but there's so many good running back plays this week.
The one thing about that Colts matchup too is the Colts and the Titans offensive line. The Colts have the 3rd best defensive line to offensive line matchup. So you'd think with the Colts defensive line being that much better, they're not going to have Levis dropping back passing a whole lot. You try to get Henry going early and try to buy Levis a little bit more time with play action and stuff like that.
Agreed. All right, Tim, give us another one of your mids here. We still got at least 2 more guys to talk about here. You're on mute, Tim.
Of course I am. No, I want to talk about Bijan Robinson. I feel like he's finally getting a little bit of more respect, right? Last week he had 16 attempts as well as 6 targets. Previous to that, he had 22 attempts. And, one thing we know about the Jets is they are one of the biggest run funnels in the NFL. So I think that they, the game plan going into this game is going to be to run the ball probably 40 times against the Jets and play defense. We'll talk about it when we get to defense, but I think the Falcons defense will end up being the highest owned defense on the week. The Jets are bad, right? It doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. The Jets are bad. So that sets up a good game script for him. And then as if, again, another cherry on top, this is another game that's projected to rain. I currently have 100% chance of rain. So Bijan did have a little bit of fumbling issues earlier in the season. Hopefully that doesn't get him benched. But if it doesn't, I think the game script looks amazing for him to have another big game.
Good stuff. You want to mention Gibbs real quick, and then we'll get down to the value?
Yeah, Gibbs last week, on Thanksgiving, I was very big on him. He got the volume. He just didn't really turn it into a lot of production. But I think it's a better than expected matchup. The Saints are pretty good to running backs, but because of his pass game usage, I think that he could be a lot better play this week than he was last week. But they're all in that same price, right? Bijan, Gibbs, and Henry are like you pick one for your GPP lineups and stack them with one of the chalky guys.
Yep, 100%. All right, we'll move down into the value tier, and we have a Steelers fan here, so I want him to talk about both of these guys because it's sort of a toss-up between these two.
I feel like we need a drop for free square, though, or something like that, right? Free square alert, because
yeah.
Zach Moss is the free square this week. If you're playing cash games and you don't have Zach Moss, you're not doing it correctly. You're playing the wrong game.
Yeah, 100%. So, Aaron, break down
go ahead.
Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren for us, basically in the same price point and similar players in respect to volume.
Yeah, I mean, Warren, obviously he's been a little bit more explosive, but Najee here lately has been a lot more deceptive than people realize. As we said earlier, he's 11 runs over 20-plus yards, and before this year, he really had just, a handful of that for his career. And now the offensive line, once they put Broderick a right tackle, they've been a lot better. And it shows the Cardinals' defensive line is the 32nd ranked unit, and it had Steelers' offensive line towards, close. It was a lot worse than I think that it really is on paper. And I think there's a bigger advantage there than people realize. And the way with Warren, he's efficient. He's getting 12+ targets a game, but he's been efficient with every one of them. And Najee, he's getting all them goal line touches. Once you get down inside the red zone, especially inside the 10, it's all Najee from there. And I mean, you could really. I mean, I've got a couple season-long teams where I've got both of them in the lineup together. And you really think about it. In the GPP, you could play both of them together for a little more than 10K, and
yeah,
you add that you could probably at least get 35 back from them combined.
Yep, 100% agree. All right.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. I really like Najee, but I think it could just as easily be a Harris week.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
But it feels like, and we saw the same thing with Gus Edwards the week that he played Arizona. It looks like teams, when they get in the red zone against Arizona, want to run the ball, and I think that really benefits Najee more than Warren.
Yeah, good call.
That rain we was talking about too could have definitely
definitely keep an eye on the rain.
It could help Najee a little more because he's been more of a straight ahead runner here recently and ain't got to cut as much.
Yeah,
that's always been his problem.
Yeah, he cuts too much.
Yeah.
He's a small
trying
back.
to string stuff outside and trying to be like Le'Veon. He ain't got the vision for it.
He's not that guy. Yeah, just be you.
His vision's always been the worst part about his game.
Tim, anything you want to say about the free square besides play him?
No, not really. I mean, he's going to be 50+% owned in tournaments, which is just insane. Like on an average week, the best plays are 30% maybe, right? And he's seriously going to be 50% owned in a lot of large tournaments. So I think there's a lot to be said about fading him, or at least going a very small percentage on him in tournaments to get massive leverage. Yeah. Like we just talked about the Pittsburgh guys. I think you can play either one of those guys instead of Moss, get a ton of leverage. And I think that they have a very similar range of outcomes.
Yeah, 100%.
That's in small field GPP projected 75% owned. I mean, that's some big leverage right there. Because with the way the pricing is, you can, like you said, you can go either Najee or Warren, but you also got Ramondre and Rashad. There's definitely leverage in some good spots too.
Agreed.
Yeah, if you play single entry and you want to know the easiest way to get different, just don't play Zach Moss, because everybody in single entry is probably going to be playing Zach Moss.
Yep.
Play someone else besides Moss and play Waddle instead of Tyreek, and you got all the leverage in the world right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we will say it again though: if you are playing cash, do not get cute. Just start your lineup with Zach Moss. Just put him in there and then start building the lineup. Don't try to fade him and be cute, because it's going to end up biting you in the ass. And it can't hurt you. That's the thing. Zach Moss can go out and get 3 points. And if he's that high owned, if he's 80% owned in cash, it's not going to hurt you, because it's going to hurt everybody else equally the same. So don't get cute. Just play Zach Moss in cash.
I think if you're playing cash, you got to, I'd say Moss, probably Brevin now, and then either Howe or Purdy. You're starting with those three probably.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's get to the receivers.
And now, wide receivers.
And we'll do the double drop.
Lock it in.
So we're talking about what guys you want to start your cash game lineup off with, right? Talk about it's either Purdy or Howell, right? Zach Moss, probably Brevin Jordan, and my boy Tyreek Hill. I've told you guys almost every week how much I love playing Tyreek Hill. He's made me a ton of money this week. I had the stat a couple weeks ago. He averaged more than 30 DraftKings points when they play a team outside of the division, right? And this week it's crazy because they get basically the best matchup, right? They on paper against the team that throws it, at one of the highest, and it's the highest employed total on the slate at 29.5. Some places have it at 30. All the puzzle pieces fit together for Tyreek to have one of those 40-point games, right? And one of the things I thought that was interesting this week is that rarely do you see sites have him projected as a good value. Even at 9,600, a lot of sites have him as like the fourth or fifth best wide receiver value on the whole slate, right? Projecting him at like 26, 27 points. So with Zach Moss, with Brevin Jordan, with the value you have at quarterback, I think you almost have to play Tyreek in cash. I think if you want to get different in tournaments, that's fine. There's plenty of high-end plays, but it's Tyreek or McCaffrey. If you're playing cash and you don't have at least one of those guys, again, I think you're playing it wrong, right? And for me, it's Tyreek this week.
Two things about you talking about the value on Tyreek on the site that I always use for receiver value. Tyreek is 3.4. The next closest is Tank Dell with 0.3.
Yeah, it's not close.
And another thing about the Washington, their defense obviously has already been bad. Well, they just fired their defensive coordinator too after this game. So this first game with new D coordinator and all that. So the communication, all that might be a little bit.
It's going to be ugly, that's for sure. Yeah, Tyreek Hill is locked into all my cash lineups, that's for sure. Aaron,
I think you put yourself. Here's the other thing about it is we always talk about in cash you don't want to put yourself on an island, right? The island you definitely don't want to put yourself on is I'm fading Tyreek on a week he's popular because there's almost no benefit to that.
Nope.
Right? Because if Tyreek goes out there and he gives you a floor for him is like 18 points, then he's not going to kill you. But if he goes out and puts up a 40 and you don't have him, you're the rake.
You're done.
So
you're done.
Yeah.
The only way I would consider that is like a monsoon game against like the Browns or someone, there's no way that you're even considering that this week.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
Aaron, what you got in your elite level tier here?
It's not super popular, I don't think. But AJ Brown, I just feel like, the Niners, they definitely they can be had at receiver. And his last couple games, there's obviously a trend when Goddard's not in the lineup, AJB's not nowhere near as effective. And Goddard's out again, but the matchup's good, and with considering both teams are going to need all the studs to pull out the win in this one. And I say they'll lean on AJ just because he's not really been involved the last two games. I think they try to get him involved early.
Yeah, and we struggle with those big receivers like that. DK Metcalf is in that same sort of mold, and he always kills us when he plays us. So
those in the slot receivers.
Yep, in the slots, absolutely. Yeah, we won't talk about that. That hurts my heart. All right, so I'm going to talk about one of the guys that is not going to be popular, and I put on the sheet for one reason and one reason only. When I went through and did my sheet the first time, I didn't put him on there. I call him copy paste because usually I put him on my sheet every single time. But he's gotten so expensive that I haven't been able to put him on there. But when I went and did my research, if you've been listening to the show for a while, I use FTN, and there's a little matchup tool. And when I hit that little matchup button, it sorts it by best matchup to worst matchup. And the 100% matchup this week is Keenan Allen at New England.
Oh, man.
So we've had success before with the Brandon Ayuk week that when he blew up a couple weeks ago, that was a 100% matchup. But the week before that, it was CeeDee Lamb. I think this past weekend we missed on it. It was Lamb again. He didn't have a huge game on Thanksgiving. So that's a little bit of an outlier. But Keenan Allen gets that matchup, the 100% matchup. I'll play that until it stops working at 9K. Now he is questionable, so you got to make sure he's in. But I think everything I've heard, it sounds like he's just he's getting a little bit of rest to get ready for the game, so he will be playing. So if you're clicking Keenan Allen, you're not clicking Tyreek Hill, so you're getting that leverage that we talked about in tournaments. Definitely don't play Keenan Allen in cash for sure. But I like Keenan this week at 9K.
We need that drop sale, Jeff. We need the going for two matchup of the week.
Yeah.
Keenan's coming in as the third highest projected running back or receiver too, just right behind Tyreek and McCaffrey. Yeah, I've got him at those two at 24 and 25, and Keenan at 21. So I mean,
wow, that's a lot higher than I expected. And the ownership that I had doesn't have him that high.
Oh, no, I'm talking about projected points. His ownership, I got him. Ownership was like around 11, 12, something like that.
Yeah, that's where I got him too, around 11, 12. But yeah, you're right. Point wise, he's in that range for sure.
He's the second best projected value receiver behind, tied with Tank Dell.
Stuff.
Wow. I'll tell you who I really like this week. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is a guy that, again, we've played pretty much all year. He's been one of the most consistent wide receivers in terms of target volume, coming off a couple of bad matchups. I mentioned last week on the show he doesn't usually play well against the Packers. He only had 18.5 DraftKings points, which is a down game for him. And now he gets a Saints team that is going to be without Marshawn Lattimore, who was put on IR earlier this week. And they have traditionally gotten torched by number ones whenever Lattimore has sat out. So he's going to get that same 10 or 11 targets he gets you every week. But now he gets it in a much better matchup in a dome against a team that gives up a lot of points to wide receivers. I think he could be kind of sneaky under-owned this week. I have him. Tell me where you have him, but I have him as like the 6th or 7th highest owned wide receiver, lower than Keenan, obviously lower than Tyreek. So I think he might be a little sneakier this week than he would be most weeks.
Yeah, I actually have him at 9 right now. So he's
under 10%. I think he's a great play.
I got him at 6, and it's showing 14% for large field.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And if you can get him anywhere in there, book it.
Yeah, and the matchup tool that I have for FTN has him with by far the best matchup of the receivers for the Lions at 82%. So that's a pretty good matchup there. So good call. All right, let's move down into the mid-tier, and that's where my
lock it in.
And I mentioned earlier about pivoting to Derrick Henry because this could be a game where Derrick Henry gets off and it forces the Colts to pass a little bit more. And then that's why I like Michael Pittman a lot this week at 7.1, of course, going to Tennessee. They are dead last versus the team's number one receiver in DVOA, give up the 6th most points overall to wide receivers. And Pittman, surprisingly, one of those things where I sorted a column on FTN, I wanted to see who was the top. And he has the highest target share inside the 20 in the entire NFL at 38.6%. So when they're getting down in the red zone, they're looking Pittman's way at 7.1 in a great matchup. I love Pittman this week. So I will be locking him in for sure. Yeah. Aaron, what you got for your mid?
I mentioned it earlier, and it's more of I think he's a good play too, just because of the game and how the Commanders are. But if you wanted to do something like in a 3 max or something like that, get a little leverage on we was talking about getting on Tyreek, you go to Waddle. If it works out for you, it's I don't see Tyreek, still I just see minimum Tyreek putting up at least 20 something, but Waddle, he definitely some leverage, and he's been getting a little more involved. But that Commanders defense, I feel like with Tua spreading the ball around, it's going to be one of them like Oprah situations. You get one, you get one, you get one. Like this.
Yeah.
And Waddle kind of had a little bit of a coming out party last week too, because I think I reverse jinxed them because I was talking to somebody at work about the game because I think that was the Black Friday game, right, last week.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so I was at work and I have Waddle in a bunch of my fantasy leagues. I was like, man, Waddle is absolutely killing me this year. And the next thing I know, I look at it and he's going off. I'm like, okay, good. Waddle got his shit together finally. So hopefully that continues into this week.
That Thanksgiving game against Washington, the Cowboys, they had Cooks and Lamb both eaten.
That's right. Yep, absolutely.
So I'm going to take the guy that neither one of y'all had, and that's Devontae Smith. I absolutely love him this week. He's probably one of my favorite plays on the whole slate because he's been priced up, and I think that's going to scare a lot of people away. But his stats with and without Dallas Goedert are absolutely insane. He's averaging, I think, 8 targets a game without Dallas Goedert. He's playing almost a third of his snaps out of the slot, which is the way that you beat San Francisco. I don't see how Philly keeps up in this game without throwing the ball, and he's been the go-to, right? Aaron talked about it a little bit with A.J. Brown. His target share has suffered a little bit over the last few weeks, and it's because it's all been going to Devontae Smith. So, we know he's got the big play upside. He's had multiple games this year over 20 DraftKings points. 7,200, he's right there in that Pittman range. Pittman's going to be much more, highly owned, I think. But he also gives you kind of that late game hammer, him and the other guy we're going to talk about here in a second, where this is my favorite secondary stack on the whole slate. You get that late game exposure. And these are the guys that can give you that, 30 points or whatever you need at the end of the day to come from behind and win the whole thing.
Yeah. And one thing too, I'll point out as a Niners fan, something that we haven't done in the past, we did it a little bit last week with Charvarius Ward, where he shadowed DK Metcalf. I could see Charvarius Ward shadowing A.J. Brown, which leaves Ambry Thomas or Demador Lenore on Devonta Smith, and that's going to spell disaster for us. So I do like Devonta Smith's great price point too as well. So good call.
That's what I was going to say as well. I really do think that Ward is going to be seeing a lot of A.J. Brown, which gives a much more favorable matchup to Devonta Smith. So.
Agreed. Let's see. We'll go back through, I guess, one more time. We still got plenty of mid-tier guys here. I'll take my favorite guy. I mentioned him on the podcast last week. Of course, I took him over Tank Dell, but Nico Collins versus Denver at 6.8. I still think he is the alpha in this offense, even though Tank Dell seems to be getting a little bit more media pub. Even the weeks that Tank Dell's had big games, Nico Collins is still out-targeted him in those games. Just Tank Dell has more of the big plays down the field. But at 6.8, he's still cheaper than Nico Collins. We mentioned C.J. Stroud earlier in the show. You can stack Stroud and Collins and get a pretty good stack going there with those guys. So I like Nico Collins this week.
I do think there's a pretty decent chance that Surtain does shadow Nico Collins. I think they usually will put Surtain on the bigger guy and Fabian Moreau on the smaller guy, which is obviously Tank Dell. So that does downgrade him a little bit for me. But I agree. I think either way, he's in a good spot. And he plays almost a third of his snaps in the slot, which Surtain doesn't really follow. So
yeah, that was
he still has an opportunity.
When I was looking at their snap percentages, it looks like the receivers move around pretty much equally, all three of them. And then when you get Noah Brown mixed in there too, they're not in one spot, exclusively. So it does help them.
Yeah.
Let's go, Aaron. What you got? Another one of your mid tiers.
I'll do two of them, kind of like we did with the Warren Sister. I'll do Ayuk and Debo together. Make it speed up a little bit. Obviously, the matchup, Philly, everybody's been able to throw on them. The one thing I will say that Philly, since they did bring Byard in, they have been a lot better against tight end. And, the game against the Bills with Kincaid, that was you've seen that. But Ayuk, he's got 6+ targets in every game, but 2. And, 6 ain't a ton, but Purdy's he's pretty efficient with it. And Ayuk's pretty efficient when he gets some targets. And Debo, he's been over 11 points in, like almost every one of the games. And this is one of them games. It really it's either going to be the one you're going to get that shootout like everybody's thinking it could be because both defenses having trouble stopping the pass, or it's going to be one of them ones you don't even see. So like 17-10 or something stupid. But I just see Ayuk and Debo. If you I think getting one of those right in a stack could be the difference. And I'm considering Debo for cash. I think I like Debo a lot this week.
Yeah, I prefer Ayuk a little bit better. I actually have him as my best wide receiver cornerback matchup other than Tyreek Hill. So I think I'm actually going to try and find a way to fit him in cash. The Philadelphia plays one of the highest rates of man coverage in the NFL, and Ayuk absolutely smashes man coverage. So I think I could be wrong here. I think they're both good plays, but I think it's an Ayuk week.
Yeah, and I was trying to pull it up real quick while y'all were talking because I didn't check it after last week, but I think Ayuk, at least at one point in the season, led in yards per catch. So those 6 targets that you're talking about, yeah, it's only 6 targets, but if you're going to catch a 20, 25-yard pass, that's going to add up pretty quickly. I'm trying to pull it up real quick. I couldn't get it, but I think if he's not the number one guy, he's definitely up there in the top 5, top 10 somewhere. So big chunk plays are going to come from Ayuk's way. I like that call.
I think with Byard, on the trying to slow down Kittle a little bit, it's also going to favor one of them receivers a lot more too.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right, let me just mention a couple of the guys that we have so we can get to the value tier. We do have Sutton, who Tim mentioned earlier as someone he likes, and we also have Terry McLaurin, obviously in that same volume game. But we still got a ton of guys in the value level. So go ahead and kick off the value guys here, Tim.
Josh Downs, have we talked about him? I'm going to go back to Josh Downs again this week. This is somebody who had kind of a down week last week, but the back end, he had 13 targets, right? He still is getting that, good volume. Now, if you watch the game, some of the targets were really ugly. They were like 2 feet above his head and, 3 feet to the left of him and all those kind of things. But when he's been healthy and Minshew's been the quarterback, he's had pretty consistent volume. He had 6 for 97 against Tennessee earlier this year. At 5,100, he kind of rates out as one of my favorite, plays in that value range. You're the way lineup construction is going this week, I think you're going to have, your last guy in for wide receiver is going to be like Deonte, Sutton, Down, something like that. And you're just going to have to pick your favorite guy. So give me the matchup against a Tennessee. I don't really love having Downs and Moss in cash, so I may get away from that. But 13 targets, man, that you can't find anyone at 1,500 that's getting that kind of
Crazy thing is, if you actually seen I've never seen a more terrible 13 targets. So
they were bad.
Yeah, they were pretty bad. But yeah, I looked it up. They're 31st versus the slot receiver in DVOA. So and Downs plays in the slot quite often. So in 13 targets, yes, it's 13 terrible targets, but hey, 13 targets is still 13 targets. Catch 1 or 2 of those for big plays, and you're good to go. So I love that call.
And we've seen him blow up before, right? He had a big game against Cleveland earlier this year, so he has that upside as well.
Yep.
I feel like he's
Deonte, where I don't know if he has that kind of upside anymore.
I feel like even though it's a different price range, but Downs and Pittman's the same as Ayuk and Debo. Whichever one of them you get right, one of them's going to do it.
Yep.
Correct.
I'll talk about a guy that I like this week, and I did kind of sort of poo-poo it a little bit, but I like Greg Dortch. He's got, I think, 17 plus targets in the last couple of games.
Yeah.
But I did read somewhere that he struggles versus man defense, which the Steelers play a lot of man.
They do.
So that could be an issue for him. But at 3.7, if he's still going to get 8, 9 targets, I still like him in that position. He's just that, he's a small, quick guy. Kyler Murray can get the ball to him quickly, and he seems to prefer him over Rondale Moore for some reason, even though I think Rondale Moore is the better athlete. I think Dortch is the one that Murray prefers. So at 3.7, he's still viable for me.
Yeah, he gets a pretty decent matchup, actually, because Joey Porter is expected to shadow Marquise Brown. So he probably is going to get a lot of Levi Wallace, which is a very beatable matchup.
Dortch, if I can't remember the stat on how much he come inside in the slot. I can't remember how much.
He does line up the slot quite a bit.
That's the one spot that's been the weakness for us since we let Hilton and them go is the slot, and I've always picked on receivers against us in the slot.
Yeah,
Patrick Peterson has been playing a lot of slot for y'all, and he's just not really a slot corner. He's always been more of an outside guy.
They had to put him to the inside just to try to, because where he's lost a step, they had to try to help him out a little bit with playing. But Porter's been solid though.
Yeah, I really don't like Hollywood at all this week because Joey Porter has absolutely shut down almost every wide receiver that he shadowed this year.
It's actually Pittsburgh is actually the number one defensive line to offensive line mismatch.
Wow, good stuff.
By a lot.
Aaron, what you got for another value receiver here?
I'll give Curtis Samuel. Last week against the Cowboys, all the targets, Howell was looking at him a lot. And like we said earlier, in all games that Samuel has finished fully, he leads all receivers on that team for the fantasy points, 11.5 per game. So any game he finishes, that's pretty solid. 4,100 in a game, they're going to be throwing a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. That game's going to be popular for sure. I like that call a lot, and he had a really good game last week.
Yeah, and then I'm obligated to shout out Jaylen Guyton every week on this podcast because he's still 3,300. Yeah. He's still getting the second most targets, and we talked about Keenan Allen is a little banged up, so I think he could be more of a play.
Yeah.
One more just real quick,
Yeah.
Pickens, with the new offense change, he had 5 targets over 15.5 yard, ADOT. Like, those are going to connect at some point.
Yep, agreed. All right, let's get to the defenses.
Defense.
All right, Tim, kick it off here.
All right, so my favorite defense this week is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers playing against Bryce Young. He's just been really bad. They've been giving up almost 11.5 points to the opposing team every week on defense. I do think the Falcons at 3,400 will be the chalk. They're only 200 cheaper than the Bucs, so if you can find the 200, get up to the Bucs over the Falcons. But I think in cash, I'm probably going with the Patriots. At home, they get a banged-up Chargers team in the rain. They're only 2,400. There is plenty of value on this slate, so you can pay up a defense if you want to. But I don't think they're worth that extra 1,000. I think I'll probably pay down this week.
Yeah, good call. What about you, Aaron? What you got for your defense?
I mean, pretty much along the same lines. The Falcons, obviously the chalk, and the Patriots are a good cheap option. And then you said the Bucs. Who else was there? Indy too. I think Indy with that offensive line mismatch, they could create some turnovers. And same thing with Pittsburgh and Arizona with the mismatches and the sacks and the pressure they get. So
yeah,
I think it's a little more spread out with defense this week than it normally is, I think.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, you had Miami on there, and I think that's really sharp. We people usually don't want to play Miami's defense, but Washington gives up so many sacks.
Yeah.
If you're paying 3,600, 3,900 is not that far away, and I don't think anybody's going to be on Miami's defense this week.
And how throws the ball 40 plus times a game. So the sacks and the turnovers, there's chances for it.
100%.
I had 2 defenses that we hadn't talked about yet. It's like we're talking about every defense that's on the slate this week, it seems. But I have the Broncos D, and we think Broncos D, we think that 70-point game versus Miami earlier in the season. But they've been a different defense over the last couple of weeks here. And looking at their points over the last 4 games, they had 16 points versus Cleveland. They had 9 versus Minnesota, 8 versus Buffalo, 17 versus Kansas City. So they're actually doing, as far as fantasy points goes, they're still doing pretty well there. So it's 2.7. I don't mind the Broncos. And then the Rams, my note on the Rams is just Joe Flacco. Like he's not going to run. He's not. They know where to find him. He's going to be sitting back there like a statue. And the Rams have 10 sacks over the last 3 games, so I think they can rack up some stacks there. At 3.7, they're a little bit more expensive. I think I'd probably go Bucks if I went up that high. But if you want a different option, Rams are also in play for me.
I'm with you on the Broncos. They were originally in my first look too.
Yeah, good call. All right, let's get to the stacks.
Goingfor2.com's weekly stack report.
All right, Aaron, why don't you kick us off here with your stack of the week?
Talked about it earlier. Like that game, Purdy, Debo, and AJB or Devontae. I mean, just either way you want to go with it. But me, it's Purdy, Debo, and AJB. Or you flip it and get them Purdy, Devontae, and Ayuk, whichever. There's few different stacks in that game, but to me, that's the one that I like the most.
Yeah, that late game hammer is just so enticing this week.
Yeah.
Right? Like the best game, arguably the best game on the slate, maybe Miami, Washington, but it's the late game. And it's just like last week, right? We're all going to be watching the late game. And if you're in the green and you don't have any 49ers or Eagles, you might be watching your lineups go right out of the green.
Yep.
That's why I mentioned earlier. You know how many times we've seen these games, like everybody's, it's going to be the best game, high scoring, and then it's like just a defensive battle. Somehow it'd be crazy if it's what ends up happening.
Yeah.
Don't even put that out into the universe.
Hey, I got to throw it out. I got to throw it out there to try to get it out of the way.
Yeah, reverse psychology there. Good stuff.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, Tim, what you got?
Yeah, so I already said that the other favorite game I have on the slate is Washington and Miami. I think the Howell stacks are a little cheaper, so I'm going to go with Howell. Curtis Samuel's a great value, or Logan Thomas, also a great value. And then, of course, running it back with Tyreek Hill.
I like it. My stack's not a true stack. It's more of a correlation. I mentioned that there's a scenario in which Derrick Henry has a big game and then the Colts are forced to pass it a ton. So I have Derrick Henry and then bringing it back with Pittman on the other side. You might even you could even throw Downs maybe in there, Henry and Downs versus Henry and Pittman. But it's a tournament stack for sure. But I do see a scenario where Henry is dominating the game and the Colts are forced to pass a little bit. So that's my quote unquote stack, more of a correlation than anything else for this week.
We call it the back-to-back stack because you had him as a lock of the week last week and lock of the week this year. So,
oh yeah, you're right. That's right. Both my locks of the week for are my correlation this week. Good stuff. All right, let's get to the sick call.
And now, the sick call of the week.
All right, I want to set this one up here because Aaron came on the show at some point last year and talked about this guy as his sick call, and ended up having 2 touchdowns in that game. So obviously crushed his sick call value. And here it is a year later, he's on the show, and surprisingly, it is his sick call once again.
same guy.
Yeah, so go ahead and give us your sick call, Aaron.
We'll go back to my boy from the U, Brevin Jordan. After seeing, all the talk about it, I don't know if so much of a sick call with the ownership he'll probably be getting now, but still before all that, I think could have been. So if when an actual sick call, it'd be more of a sick stack. We'll go with Pickett Pickens, Warren with the Dortch run back. That's a sick.
There you go. I love it.
I like it. Good stuff.
Yeah, man. I love that. I was on Dalton Schultz before he got ruled out. So Brevin Jordan's literally half the price, and I don't necessarily think he's half the athlete. So I love that call. I think he's a lock for me in cash as well. There's just so much value this week, man, and I think Jordan's a big part of that. I'm going with, and this is honestly a guy, I'm going to look it up. I guess I can look at my history. I don't think I've played this guy all season. Jonathan Mingo. Right? Because I usually don't play Panthers, but this guy's been kind of coming along. Last 3 weeks, 7 targets, 6 targets, 6 targets. Adam Thielen, maybe, coming down a little bit. I think he could have a good week. We didn't talk about it, but this is a game where everybody has been able to show up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? Like you feel like Bryce Young, you gotta show me something this week, right? And I think if he does have a good week, it's going to be through Jonathan Mingo at only 3,300. But Hayden Hurst is out, right? Which is Tommy Tremble is banged up. Like they're kind of locked for receivers in Carolina. So 3,300, I think he's a sick call, but I think he's got some upside. It's really weird on this slate because like there's so much value. Picking a sick call is tough, but
yeah,
I think he's got some upside. I really do.
Washington's about to beat Oregon now.
Oh, man. Everybody, Washington money line, that was always the lock, right?
I can't believe they was given 9.5. That's crazy.
Yeah. All right, so my sick call, unlike Tim saying that he has not played Mingo his entire season, this is a guy.
This is your boy, yeah.
This is like I've had this sick call a couple times last year too, towards the end of the year, and that's Jameson Williams at 3.6 going at New Orleans. He's finally getting the snaps. He had 68% of the snaps last week, his most that he's ever had. He's only getting 3 targets a game so far, but he has had some pretty big targets. He's caught a couple touchdowns. And Jameson kind of runs, we talked earlier about the Texans and how the receivers kind of move around. Jameson's all over the place. He's got 38% on the left side, 33 in the slot, 29 on the right side. So he's not really lining up any cornerback particular. So I do think that it takes one play really with Jameson at that 3.6 if he can just hit that long touchdown. So hopefully this is the time that Jameson pays off for me, or I may have to finally give up on him. But I got him in a bunch of my dynasty lineups, and I really hope that he finally eventually pays off.
Jameson and Quentin Johnson, those two are the 2 young receivers this year that's been disappointments for me.
Yeah. Agreed, 100%. All right, that wraps the show up. Aaron, I want to thank you for coming on. I know with your work schedule, it's really tough to get you on the show. We've had you booked a couple of times, and it just didn't work out. So glad to finally get you on the show, man. Really appreciate you hopping on. I know you don't do any content anymore these days, but if you want to plug anything right now, you go ahead and take the opportunity to do that.
No, I appreciate giving me a chance to get it worked out to get on here. I've been looking forward to being able to. I hate to have to back out a couple times, but being on call every day it's a pain, but we got it worked out at least. So hopefully we continue our winning ways this week, huh?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Tim, what you got going on?
Yeah, first of all, shout out to everybody who donated to Jeff's Toys for Tots charity drive. Like you said at the top of the pod, we absolutely smashed our goal there. Every week I do a thread in the DFS Roundtable group on Facebook where I gather the best information from all over the internet and put it in one place for you. So definitely hop in there and check that out.
Yeah, if y'all haven't checked that thread out, y'all are missing out. Like he puts a lot of information in that Facebook thread. that is extremely helpful. It's all in one place. It's
saving y'all some money and time for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Geoff Lambert 77. I do want to sort of promote the December 20th, our annual holiday show, which Tim will be on. We basically just drink and play trivia. It's a lot of fun. So if you want to join us on the show, I got some good things planned this year that we're going to do. It'll be all the Going for Two live hosts will kind of jump on and have a good old time. So join us December 20th. We'll be doing that at 9:30 p.m. All right. For Aaron, for Tim, I'm Geoff. Good luck to everybody in the chat. Good luck to everybody listening to this on the audio. And we'll see y'all next week.
Go Pack, go!